So my name is Jess. I am one of the human resource business partners for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island. And I've been with the company for about 8 months now, and did begin in a virtual setting. So I can't wait to share kind of all the tips and things I've learned through this process. I began my HR career about 6 years ago, and I've been doing it ever since.
Great, thank you. And when students are preparing for an interview, what are some of the things they should do just to have in mind?
Yeah, so when preparing for a virtual interview, which obviously is very different than preparing for a face-to-face interview, it looks like that will be the format that companies interview candidates moving forward. I don't think we'll ever see companies go back to the office maybe 100% of the time. So I think this will be somewhat a new norm for a lot of organizations. So one suggestion I have is for students to test their technology beforehand. It's very important that when you're preparing for an interview or about to sit in for an interview, that you have your camera on, you have your audio on, that there are no distractions around you. And that you really test the platform that the organization is using. I'm starting to see a lot of different organizations use a lot of other different platforms other than the Zooms, Microsoft Teams of the world. And sometimes it can be very frustrating if you are logging in 5 minutes before your interview or 10 minutes before your interview, and you don't know how the platform works, you don't know how to navigate it. So I find that that's very frustrating. I've had it happen to me just on the other end of it. So I would suggest that you test your technology the night before, and then also test it about 30 minutes before your scheduled interview.
Thank you. And during an interview, what are some of the things that students should be mindful of or be aware of?
Yeah, so during an interview, students should be mindful of, I think, limiting distractions. I've conducted several interviews where there's a lot happening in the background. Again, if we have pets and things like that, you want to make sure that, you put them in another room or in a quiet space while you're in the interview. Again, it's one of those things that it just shows that you're preparing for the interview. I would also suggest that you limit the background distraction. So make sure you're in a room that has good lighting. I've also had several interviews where people are looking down. I can tell they're using their phone, but their phone's like almost like near their chest and I can't really see their face. So you want to make sure you kind of check all of that out before your scheduled interview. Log into the platform, turn on the camera, turn on the audio, take a look at what it looks like around you. I have had several interviews as well where there's a lot happening in the background and it's very difficult to focus because I'm looking at what's happening behind the person, not really listening to what they're saying. So that would be definitely one of my suggestions. Just make sure you limit the distractions and that you take a look and review your background before your scheduled interview.
Great, thank you. And what are some of the biggest or most common mistakes you see people make in interviews, both, I suppose, virtual and in person?
I would say one of them is rambling. If you don't know the answer, it's okay to just say, can I have a minute to think about that? Or, oh, I've never been asked that question or something along those lines. It's okay for there to be silence in an interview. I think a lot of individuals think that's a bad thing. It's actually not. We're okay with, it's showing that you're trying to think through your answer versus just like rambling off the first thing that comes to mind. So that's definitely one of the suggestions I would make, or one of the mistakes I see happen often. The second is not preparing for the interview. I'm starting to see this quite often, and I'm really surprised by it, honestly. Again, you want to show that I guess it depends on how bad you want the job, right? Or how bad you want the internship or the position or whatever it may be. But it does need to come across that you are interested, that you want to learn, that you are eager to join the organization. And I'm not seeing a lot of individuals preparing for interviews. They're kind of just trying to wing it. And that really does make the difference towards the end when we're trying to select final candidates, we see the difference between someone who prepares for an interview and someone who does not. It's day and night. So I would say common mistake is not preparing for an interview, not thinking of commonly asked questions in an interview, not doing your research on the company at all. There's a lot you can learn from checking out the website, even Googling the company name. You'll see news articles, you'll see industry trends, you'll see community news that comes up. So that is definitely a common mistake I see.
Thank you. Definitely guilty of the rambling. And what are some of the big differences between a virtual interview and an in-person interview? And on the flip side of that, how are they similar?
Yeah, so I think the main difference is that obviously you can't really see the person's energy as much in a virtual interview. I think that virtual interviews help individuals who are maybe more shy, more reserved. It creates that barrier for them not to be, as reclusive, I would say, which is great. I think it's opened up an opportunity for organizations to meet a lot of different people that maybe we would not have otherwise. So I would say that's the biggest difference. It's the energy. Like it's very difficult to pinpoint that in a virtual interview versus a face-to-face. Another that I would say would be body language. So in virtual interviews, I think people think that you have to be like very robotic and kind of, when you're speaking and all of those kinds of things, and you don't at all. I think that having eye contact is very important. I'm seeing a lot of candidates who are literally like, I don't know, looking down the whole time. And I guess it's a nervous thing that they're doing, but I think when you're in a live interview, because we're in person, it'll force you to look up. You can't look down the whole time. Whereas in a virtual interview, you're kind of looking around, you're looking down and those kinds of things. What I suggest is students and even regular individuals, I have to do it for myself as well, because I'll start looking at the corner. I'm like, did I fix that? I did not fix that. Something's crooked. My mind starts going elsewhere. I would say put something colored on the camera or somewhere so that you can focus your attention, and so that you're constantly looking at that one thing, and it'll help you. I find that was very helpful for us whenever we are having meetings and things like that. So I would say that's probably the biggest difference. I think I think you asked what was the most common thing. Was that the follow-up question?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, so how are they similar, I suppose, in a way?
Similar. I think there's a lot of differences more than there are similarities. I just think if a candidate is eager and interested in obviously the position, it'll still come through, whether you're virtual or face-to-face. I think your eagerness will still come through, and how confident you are while you're interviewing will still come through a camera, believe it or not. And so I would say, as you're preparing for interviews, just really know that you have something to offer, you have something of value. It's not just the organization that looks at you and says, oh, are we picking that person? You also have to know that like you have something to bring to the organization. And I find that candidates don't approach interviews that way. They approach it more like, please pick me, am I what you want? What are you looking for? I'll be whatever you need me to be. And I totally understand that. I've done them myself as well. So but just be confident and know that like you have something great to offer as well. So
yeah, that is great advice. And interviewing can be incredibly awkward, especially when you're first getting used to it. So what are some of the things that students can do to get used to it and feel a little bit more practiced in interviewing?
I think that's a great question, and I don't think people do this enough, but I would say practice interviewing, listen to the speed of your voice. I have individuals that I've interviewed and it's not even a ramble. They're just speaking way too fast. I can't even digest what they're trying to say. I would say the best way to get good at interviewing is to practice. Have mock interviews, have friends interview you. I have a lot of friends. They're always like, Jess, can you just practice with me and ask me questions. Throw in a hard, difficult question. Don't ask yourself all the easy questions, and ask others to give you their feedback. I think it's very important when you're preparing, especially if you're going to go through a series of interviews because you are job searching, that you not only do mock interviews, but that you record yourself and listen to yourself and what you are saying. I know it's very weird, it's very awkward. I'm one that I don't like to listen to myself at all. I don't like to watch myself because I'm like, ew, I do that? What is wrong with my eyebrow? So I would say that that's the best way to get good at it. And then also to be aware of kind of what your experience is, what you have to offer, and really know it well. I don't need, like when I'm interviewing, I don't want somebody to rehearse to me their resume. That's not helpful at all. One common question that we often ask is, tell me a little bit about yourself. What a question. And it goes a million ways. It either goes well, or I've seen it go really bad, where the person is rambling about personal things. They're sharing things that are not relevant. The purpose of the question, a lot of times, is for it to be open-ended so that you can share what you want to share. So I would say that's always a great question to practice. Share a little bit about your education, a little bit about your experience, what you want to do and what your career goals. And then if you want to close it off with maybe like a hobby or something you enjoy doing, that's always fun. And I love that because I love when I'm interviewing a candidate and, I can tell they're authentic, they're just genuine, and they're just sharing what they want to share. But please, 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 please refrain from going off board with that question.
Lastly, is there any sort of general job hunting advice or interviewing advice that you would offer to students?
Yes. So I would say, especially in the climate we're in now, what's been great about this remote setting is that it's opened up a lot of opportunities to work at a lot of different places, companies and organizations that typically would probably never work, commit to a remote setting have now done that or are in the process of doing that. And I think it's great. We have candidates from all over the state, all over the country that we're interviewing, and it's awesome. So I would say in your job search, don't just limit yourself to Rhode Island or Massachusetts or Connecticut, wherever you're from. Really expand kind of your job search. Where would you be willing to work? If you are willing to relocate, I mean, a lot of companies are paying people to relocate. If obviously the job is the right fit for them, and we're the right fit for them, and they're the right fit for us. We're doing that now with a few candidates. We're actually paying for them to move to Rhode Island. And again, I think it's great. It opens a huge, vast opportunity that we didn't have before. So I would say if you're not having luck in Rhode Island, which is very small, so if you're not having luck finding a job in Rhode Island, expand your search. Massachusetts, Connecticut. Again, normally we would have never thought of working in these places, but I think that the quarantine pandemic and all of that has kind of helped shift that mindset a little bit. So I would say expand your job search for sure.